In an interview with the LA Times, Dodgers pitcher Clayton Kershaw said he disagreed with his team's decision to invite the group Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to appear at Pride Night. Welcome back to Inside the Issues. I'm Alex Cohen. The group uses drag and religious imagery to call attention to intolerance. But when the Dodgers faced criticism for their invitation, the team rescinded, then facing backlash from many who supported the sisters' appearance, the Dodgers decided to invite them back. This is one of many examples of the challenges companies face during Pride Month. And joining me now with more is business consultant Rex Wilde. It is great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here.
You consult with all sorts of companies and organizations, and I should note, including our Spectrum News. I'm curious, when you talk to companies, what do you think most organizations aspire to or want when it comes to inclusivity?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that companies are thinking about is first and foremost being inclusive of their LGBTQ employees, right? They want to make sure that they're a top-tier employer, that they are able to recruit folks from the LGBTQ community. But when we're working with folks in historically marginalized community like the LGBTQ community, there's often an issue between the education that other staff members have in making sure that they're actually being inclusive of those other employees. And so often we need to see a lot of education that's paired with policies that many companies might already have.
It's so interesting. I mean, there's the work that is done within, and then there's the work that is done without. And I feel like that's where we start seeing just a lot of things happening, especially when it comes to Pride Month. I mean, we should be honoring of all people at all times of the year. But what do you tell companies? Okay, they're like, okay, June's coming up, it's Pride Month. What do we do? What do you tell them?
Absolutely. We tell them that you need to make sure that their actions are also in alignment with they're showing publicly, right? So if they're going to be putting, for example, their pride flags on their logos, what are the actions that are actually showing visible physical support of the LGBTQ plus community? So from an internal and an external perspective. Internally, they might do things like make sure that they have policies and procedures that are going to be affirming of the LGBTQ community, and that can also be paired with education, since a lot of folks, especially around the trans, non-binary, and gender expansive community, don't have a lot of exposure, don't have a lot of knowledge and education. So educating those employees can be a great way to help with that. But then from an external perspective, we want to make sure that they are also supporting the LGBTQ community in things like making sure that they are supporting LGBTQ local organizations, for example, that they're really standing up for the LGBTQ community and the actions that they have as well.
And I would say that the initial invite to the local LA chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, you could see it was a community hero where, like, that seems like a great example of that. But then they catch all this heat and then they say, no, 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 don't come. And then they catch more, you know, but if they called you up, and I don't know, maybe they did, but if the Dodgers say, Rex, we're in it now, we do. What would you have told them throughout this whole journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I would have told them first is that, you know, their initial inclination to be supportive of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is exactly what they want to do, right? Right now, we're living in a really complicated time. There are over 500 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation, for example, that have been put forth in state legislatures just in this past year. And so because of that, we're looking at companies to really stand up and make sure that they are doing right by the LGBTQ plus community. And the reality is that because most people don't know exactly what those steps are, making sure that they are moving in a way that's going to be supportive from step A to step Z is really important. And so when we saw with the Dodgers being initially supportive, giving them this wonderful community award, that's exactly we need to be seeing. Local organizations who are doing important work in the LGBTQ community being uplifted, being supported, and being named for that work. Now, obviously, things got complicated.
Because of religion, in no small part, right? A lot of times these things get complicated for many reasons, but, you know, I think the religious component to it with the sisters was really what kind of took everything up a notch. Clayton Kershaw told the Times, and I quote, "This has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community or pride or anything like that. This is simply a group that was making fun of a religion that I don't agree with." Of course, the sisters are saying, no, 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 we embrace religion. We're trying to embrace everybody. And then last week, Kershaw announced the Christian Faith and Family Day at Dodger Stadium that he was really pushing for. So, you know, as someone who is all about inclusion, what do you do? We're like, okay, if you do this, then some of your players and some of your fans aren't going to feel included. So what do you do?
Yep. I think that goes back to seeing that a lot of folks have a misunderstanding of things like what the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are doing, right? I think a lot of folks will see that and make assumptions that there is a mockery being made, when in reality, if you look at the work that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence have been doing for decades, you can actually see the exact opposite, where they are in support of religion. They are actually working with community churches even in their day-to-day in order to help marginalized communities that don't otherwise get reached with community services. And so I think that, you know, statements like that from Kershaw just show that kind of missed perspective, right? And that's where it goes back to education and making sure, you know, when you're looking at something like that and maybe you don't understand, you know, why are these people doing drag as nuns, for example? Going and looking at the work that they're actually doing and what they are doing in the community to have a better understanding of them, of their hearts, and of the actual impact that they're having.
I just want to take a moment to shine on the light on the words you said, missed perspective. Language is so important. I think that's a really beautiful way of saying it. I don't want to dwell just on the Dodgers because, of course, a lot of other things that have been happening recently. Bud Light facing a boycott after partnering with a trans influencer. That's resulted in a stock dip of 20% for them. A lot of ink spilled over Target. They pulled out a lot of their Pride merchandise or hid it in the back of the store after, you know, there's a lot of criticism of it and even threats of violence. What would, you know, Target calls you and says, hey, we're not just worried about losing our customer base, we're worried about our workers getting hurt over this. What do you advise there?
I mean, first and foremost, to me, it's a really simple solution. They need more security. They're having people who are coming in and vandalizing their stores. So what would any store do if something like that was happening? They're not going to hide that merchandise, right? If it was something else that was being vandalized, no, they're going to increase security. They're going to make sure that they're doing what they need to in order to protect their employees.
Yeah, we just have a few moments left, but you talked about hanging pride flags everywhere. There's something you and a lot of folks talk about as rainbow washing. Can you briefly describe that for us and what groups should try to avoid on that front?
Absolutely. So rainbow washing is what we see when organizations and companies are putting up rainbow pride flags, for example, for the month of Pride, but then they're not actually putting the action behind it to support the LGBTQ community in other ways. So for example, we see companies who are in support of and donating money to legislators who support anti-LGBTQ legislation, right? But then they put rainbow flags up during Pride Month, and that's really contradictory. So we want to make sure that what we're seeing from companies, if they are going to be putting rainbow pride flags up and saying that they support the LGBTQ community, is actually ensuring that they are also supporting the health, safety, and well-being from a political and legislative perspective as well.
Rex Wilde of Rex Wilde Consulting, who will be appearing at Santa Monica Pride this weekend with the guests that we have coming up on the show this hour. Rex, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you so much, Alex.